Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching the big picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Well, describing an aggressive China as the most serious competitor to the US, President Joe Biden has said that his administration will take on the challenges posed by Beijing directly, but will not hesitate to work with it when it is in America's interest to do so. Realizing that a rising and more assertive China as one of the biggest foreign policy challenges, Biden on Thursday stressed the importance of allies in responding to the strategic competition posed by Beijing. The China US relationship is crucial to both sides and the world. Tensions have soared in recent times over trade, espionage, and the coronavirus pandemic. Biden, a Democrat, has also said that his administration is ready to work with China when it is in America's interest to do so. In this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze Biden's policy on China and what it means for India and the other allies. Joining me on the program today are Prabhu Dayal, former ambassador, Dhruv Katoch, Director, India Foundation, and Sriram Cholia, Foreign Affairs Analyst. Thank you to my panelists for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, let me begin the program with you first. You know, it's been a few weeks into the presidency, and now we seem to be seeing US foreign policy taking some shape. The president himself talking about what, in which direction his foreign policy is going to move towards. Your thoughts?
Well, Frank, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. And let me state that President Biden has said what everybody already knew, that America will take on China because China directly impinges on US interests. And at the same time, of course, if there are certain areas where they can work together, then why not? Because after all, foreign policy is governed by national interests. There are no permanent enemies, no permanent friends. There are only permanent national interests. So American foreign policy is going to be shaped by what Biden and his administration perceive as US interests. Now, in this regard, let me state categorically that the areas where the United States and China can work together are much less important in comparison to the areas where they come into direct conflict. Both Biden and his Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, have named climate-related issues as areas where the United States will work together with China. But look at the areas where the interests of these two major powers come into clash. Chinese expansionism, particularly in the South China Sea area, and its economic expansionism have been hurting American interests and are perceived as major threats by US policymakers. At the same time, in the technology area, China has become a major competitor to the United States. So, in my view, the conflict between the United States and China, which had peaked during the Trump era, is not going to fade away because Chinese policy is not going to change. China will not give up its expansionism, and therefore it will not be possible for US foreign policy makers to overlook this aspect of the global scenario. So, to put it in a nutshell, I think that while there will be some attempts to work along with China on certain issues, by and large, US China relations will be shaped by the conflict which exists between them.
Absolutely. All right. So let me take that particular aspect forward with you, General Katoch, and what's likely to happen and where is the theater going to be really as far as the clash between the United States and China is concerned. We saw recently in the South China Sea that, the Chinese sent away a US vessel that was there. So are we going to see more escalation, especially on the seas?
Yes, Frank. I think you see what we are really looking at when I'm looking at the US China equation as of now. it is really something what we can call cold peace. And I don't see it moving towards a Cold War the way it existed in the 80s and prior to that between the US and the Soviet Union. So, what we are really looking at in that cold peace scenario, there'll be a lot of suspicion between the two actors. We are looking at cooperation, as mentioned by Ambassador Dayal, and we are also looking at competition. Now, the competitive edge is going to be on three critical factors. Technology, I think, is going to be one of the main players because that will reflect on everything else. Technology is uniformly constant for economics and for defense. So, technology is going to be the major player where China is playing a very fast catch up game in many spheres. The second important the game is going to be played on the economic sphere. But I think where the tensions will really ratchet up is when you are looking at the military engagement, and that is going to take place in the South China Sea. Now, how the South China Sea evolves, because China has made it very clear that any attempt on the part of Taiwan to declare independence, which as of now, their government has been very circumspect and they're not going down that path. But China has made it very clear that any attempt towards that will be treated as war. Now, if China stops it at that level, then I think there can be a certain level of rapprochement between the United States and China. But if China keeps pushing its agenda, then it is going to force a choice on the United States. Now, what choice will President Biden make in terms of what has been spoken of earlier as US national interest? Now, if they come to the aid of Taiwan, then obviously they have made a very firm choice, and we are looking at a Cold War situation henceforth. But if they do not do so, then I think they would lose all credibility in the Indo-Pacific. Now, that is going to hurt their interest tremendously also. So I think in my personal view, I think what the administration will do as of now, they are going to play a wait and watch game. It'll be seeing how the cards unfold over the next, say, 1 year or so, and then keep tweaking their policy accordingly. But the point is the pressure which the previous president had exerted on China, if President Biden is seen to be soft on China, then he is handing over a very great trump card to the former President Donald Trump. And I think that is something also which the Democrats will be very careful about, handing over an advantage to the Republicans. So there is no way in which the Democrats can actually shift sides, so to say. So we are looking at a very interesting situation. And I think India will also have to see as to how it is going, because we are interested as far as the Quad is concerned and how we can take the Quad forward.
Absolutely. I'll come to India in just a bit. Let me get in the reaction from Sriram Chaulia as well. As far as the appointments that have been made thus far, are there any indication as to what the US's plans are as far as China is concerned and the region as a whole is concerned, be it the Secretary of State or the Defense Secretary?
Yeah, Frank, I think President Biden has actually hit the ground running. I mean, in fact, I was expecting to be softer in his opening comments about China. I know it's just a new administration. Typically, US governments, when they come in, they often think in terms of moderating and looking for resets with their major systemic rivals or competitors. But in this case, I think the scale of the competition and the rivalry with China has reached such a level. I think, especially in the last 1.5 years. So it's almost like a segue from Trump to Biden. I mean, the tone is slightly more moderate. But otherwise, I think the crux of the policy seems to be quite hardline. So that's welcome news, I think, for many of us in the region who are worried about Chinese hegemony. Biden mentioned, and in terms of appointments also, Frank, you see Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the new ambassador to the UN. It's not only economic rivalry over trade and China stealing American intellectual property or jobs or technology or even geopolitical rivalry. A lot of the Democratic base wants to shine a light on the human rights situation in mainland China and in the territories that it controls. But Biden and his team are going to really, I think, highlight more and more of the extreme totalitarian and authoritarian values that China represents. So I think in that sense, the liberals, unlike the Trump administration, are going to highlight more of this democracy or the lack of democracy and freedom in China as a big issue and try to rally the allies and partners around that point. In fact, Biden mentioned we will take on directly China's challenge to prosperity, security, and values. You see, so the values part also, I think, is going to really, really anger the Chinese, and you're going to see a lot of bitter recriminations and back and forth between their spokespersons and the Americans going forward. And I think even in the developing world, there is going to be a struggle between the two value systems more and more. State-guided capitalism and totalitarianism of China and the free market capitalism or the moderate capitalism of the US. You're going to see more of that, whether you want to call it Cold War, Cold Peace, whatever, but it's there, that ideological distinction is going to come sharper, I expect. Other appointments, Kurt Campbell is somebody to watch out. The US government has appointed him as the coordinator for Indo-Pacific. He's the one who drafted the idea of the pivot to Asia under Obama administration, which was clearly focused at counterbalancing China, especially in the maritime and naval domains. That's also bad news. Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, some people said that he has not got a Asia experience. He's more of a Middle East person. He was head of the CENTCOM, the US military headquartered in the Arab world, and that he really doesn't know much about Indo-Pacific. But I don't think that's the case. I mean, once you're defense secretary, you're not operational command of one theater or the other. You're running the whole country, and the priorities. You will see that they will draft a new national security strategy, the new Biden administration soon, and you will see that it is reflected. Biden calling China the main competitor and saying we're going to take them on directly. I think it is showing that he has realized that the world has changed. There was once upon a time a Biden who was more of a moderate vis-a-vis China, who believed in the old liberal idea that somehow through cooptation and through cooperation, China can be changed and to be made more democratic and more amenable to American interests. That's not happening. The Chinese, like colleagues were saying on the panel, have become very, very hawkish and aggressive. Sure. So I think Biden, for all his instincts of being a liberal, is going to be a very, very realist on this matter.
Okay, all right. Taking the discussion forward now, Ambassador, let me come to you. So, talking about strategic competition, how worried is the US of strategic competition from China? How much of a concern is it? And when it talks about, allies also taking part and ensuring that we put an end to China's strategic competition, especially in the region, what is it that Biden is likely to expect from the allies?
Well, Frank, the strategic threat from China is perhaps the biggest danger which is perceived to US interests by the new administration. Now, Professor Chaulia had referred to the reset which every new administration attempts when it takes over. The Biden administration has also sort of attempted a reset, because while it has emphasized on the importance of taking on the danger from China headlong, I think there is a slight difference in nuance that he has attempted, and that is that he wants to take his allies from Europe along with him. Donald Trump had been very callous in his treatment of NATO allies, but Biden feels that US interests will be better served if old allies from NATO were to work alongside the United States in confronting China. So Joe Biden has already said that he will try to work with his allies in tackling the dangers which come from China. The dangers are not going to go away so easily. Everybody realizes it. There will have to be a very determined, long drawn out effort in tackling China, because the Chinese have made it very clear that they perceive themselves as the possible number one global power. and that they are doing everything within their means to pursue these objectives. Whether they will be able to do so or not is another matter, but they do perceive themselves as the dominant power, particularly in their own region, even if it threatens the interests of other countries. Now, interests of countries like India, Japan, Australia have been threatened, and so have also been the interests of the United States. So, in my view, not only will Biden try to take along more seriously his NATO allies, but he will continue working with countries which have been part of the Quad grouping, because America knows very well that it cannot go it alone when it comes to tackling the danger from China. It needs to work alongside, because of the fact that the danger from China is indeed so massive. So, in a nutshell, I think you will see the Biden administration attempting to work with allies and garnering more and more support from allies in this task of taking on China.
Absolutely. General, since we are here, let's also focus on the Quad, for a little while. And can we see the Quad playing a far more active role now going forward?
Frank, I think if the US is keen on the Quad, then it is going to go far. Then there will be a tremendous ratcheting up and a fast forward movement. Now, that will really depend on how President Biden wants to take his policy towards China, or how he perceives China is to be tackled. In my view, I think it will be important for the United States to take the Quad forward. And if the Americans are on board, then the other three countries in the Quad will be very happy to go along. If the Americans tend to dither there, I think there will be a very great deal of dithering on the part of the Australians and the Japanese also, which will look at very slow movement henceforth. Now, I think which way the Quad should go, in my view now, is besides the security element, I think it has to have the economic element too. So, can you make the Quad grouping, or will the Biden administration move this Quad grouping onto an economic agenda also? Because if it goes along the economic agenda, then it is a direct challenge to RCEP. And I think that will be a very important step, because China can be excluded, the Americans will come in, and all the other players in RCEP can actually get on board onto the Quad. Now, this could be a strategy. It is a worthwhile strategy if it is followed. But I think it is something which, if it takes place, it will suit India's national interests very well. I think, again, we will have to see a wait and watch policy. But from India's side, I feel that the push should be towards strengthening the Quad and assuming a primacy role in the Indian Ocean region as far as the Quad is concerned. Frank.
Absolutely, yeah. So since we're here, then Shriram Chalya, let's take that particular aspect forward. What does this mean for India? What needs to be done going forward as far as India is concerned?
I think we are in close contact with the Biden administration at all levels, and our diaspora and our linkages there are very strong. Our congressional caucus in the US is bipartisan, and I think a lot of the unpredictability that Trump had created is kind of subsided now with the new mainstream government in Washington. So I think we can expect lots of issues to be ironed out. Already the indications are good. In West Asia, it looks like Biden will slowly create a thaw with Iran, which it is in our interests that they cooperate. It's now quite obvious from Biden's first foreign policy speech that China will be right in the middle of the target practice for the Americans. So I think in that sense there's more cooperation. I think that we should look at trilateral cooperation. I know when we say multilateral, it often people think of 5 or 10 or 15 countries, but also US India plus one. We should be very, very proactive in seeding ideas in the new US administration. For example, there has been a military coup right next door in Myanmar. and the Americans came out openly condemning it. India also said it's a serious concern. We don't want sanctions. I don't think we will want to go that far as sanctions on the new military regime for very obvious geostrategic reasons. But nonetheless, this is an area where India and United States should be able to work together, and we should iron out differences and come up with a common strategy. See, Biden is coming from a point of weakness because of the domestic problems in the US. So despite his foreign policy speech and his willingness to challenge China across all issue areas, he will need a lot many more countries to tag along and to work closely with the US, because America, with the corona pandemic, with the economic depression, with the racial justice and the social polarization, all these problems at home cannot be a kind of like a colossus on the world stage. That era is over, and Trump simply brought it to a close. So I don't think that they can do this on their. So I think we should look at Myanmar, we should look at Nepal, whereas the Chinese are trying to somehow prevent a next election from happening and to prevent people's will from being exercised, because their puppets are still in power, even though the coalition has broken of the coalition of the leftists. America is equally concerned as India about what is going to happen to Nepal. Likewise, Sri Lanka, since the Rajapakshas have come back, they have been quieter compared to the earlier time. But quietly behind the scenes, China is again building up a lot of leverage there through infrastructure lending and investments. We should fortify all these countries, and India is now become much more open-minded than it was before to partner with the US and with other like-minded countries like Japan,
right,
to secure these countries. So I think trilateral cooperation is one area we should seriously approach, and of course broader multilateral cooperation. I think the 5G rollout, we should plan not only for our domestic market, but we should try and provide alternatives, combining not only with the US, because once Biden is in power, he's also mending fences with the Europeans. Sure. And the Europeans are a little bit caught in between. They wonder whether they should side with the US or should be neutral and should build themselves up as a parallel autonomy to the US and also work with the Chinese. So I think our relations with the EU will intersect with the new Biden administration's approach of creating a broad multilateral coalition. So 5G, the alternatives to Huawei and ZTZ are there. These are European largely, like Swedish companies like Nokia and Ericsson, or South Korean companies like Samsung and LG and so on. So I think we need to work with these alternative partners and create a coalition for technology self-reliance, which is able to break the stranglehold of the Chinese right now on this field. And that's how I think the tech war will go forward. It is not USA versus China. It's
points taken. Let me take the points that you're making to the other panelists now and get their thoughts in as well. So, Ambassador, as far as US-India ties are concerned, where does this leave us? What is it that India can do? What is it that the US is expecting out of us? Quick closing comments from all my panelists on that particular line of thought. Starting first with you, Ambassador.
The most important dimension of Indo-US relations in recent years has been in the strategic area. India and the United States have come closer as strategic partners. And it is very important that the United States should realize India's importance in this context. Now, there has been talk of putting CAATSA sanctions against India if India goes ahead, as it is doing, with the purchase of S-400 missile systems. Now, CAATSA will very adversely impact the growing strategic partnership between India and the United States. This is natural. And the United States policy planners must take into account this aspect. Putting CAATSA against Turkey is one thing, but against India, which is its strategic ally in the context of the South China Sea and this entire Indo-Pacific area, I think that would be disastrous for US policy in regard to India. Of course, there are certain aspects of US policy which may take time to reverse. For instance, on trade, Trump had put certain restrictions and had taken away certain benefits which had been available to India under the GSP. This may take a little time to undo, but it is very, very important that the strategic relationship should be kept on track and the United States should not do anything which would adversely impact this.
Right.
At the same time, as I said, the other aspects have to be worked together also onto, like immigration and trade and climate and health issues and all that. But if the strategic relationship is adversely impacted, then the others will also do so, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely. General.
Frank, I think we will have to be very careful about this, the aspect of the strategic relationship, especially with respect to the possible sanctions which can come out of the S-400 deal with Russia. Now, how our diplomats and our political establishment can veer around this particular stumbling block will have to be seen, because America is actually also on the horns of a dilemma. If they don't impose sanctions on India on the S-400 deal, they'll be perceived to be weak. And if they do it, then they're losing out a very important component of the strategic relationship. But I think we can actually veer around this diplomatically. I feel that India and the United States must move towards very strong technological cooperation. The US has a great deal to offer India, but we must also remember India has a great deal also to offer to the United States, and we can work along this path to the mutual benefit of both. Frank.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Sriram Chaulia, in 30 seconds, quick closing comments from you on the program.
Yeah, Frank, the new US National Security Council has come up with a very categorical comment that they will not allow China to intimidate its neighbors. We have to hold them to their words. What do they mean by that? From an Indian point of view, it's not just buying more high-tech weaponry from the US. They're always willing to sell us more. But it's not only surveillance and drones and such things, or more fighter jets or missiles. I think we need to involve the Americans more closer with regard to our own, the direct threat that we are facing at LAC. Let them come in, let them observe what's happening there. I think the level of trust between India and US is much higher today. Let them contribute in some fashion other than just hardware. Let us really make this a de facto alliance. Frankly, after Galwan, all our blinkers are off. We cannot, our strategic autonomy lies in a de facto alliance.
Sure.
We have now move away from the era of shying away from alliances, because that is the future to create a counterbalance in the world.
Absolutely. All right. On that note, then, I'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to my panelists for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective. For us, what's coming out of this particular discussion is that the US is going to try to cooperate with China, and a reset of ties has been tried. But there are several areas of competition between the two nations, and it's most likely that they're going to compete with each other going forward rather than working with each other. It's a situation of cold peace, is what one of the panelists called it. And it looks like the tensions that we've seen in the recent past under the Trump administration are going to continue in the Biden administration as well. And what's going to be different this time around is that Biden is going to try to take all allies on board and move forward together as a whole. And India, too, can play a big role here, where we can strengthen the strategic partnership between India and the United States. We have a lot to offer, as far as both nations are concerned, and we have a lot to gain as well. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.